Good evening, everybody. Evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Councillor Mpofu Alice, Chair of the Adult Social Care, Children Services and Education Committee. I would like to welcome you to tonight's meeting with councillors are required to attend in person. We'll be using the equipment to connect the chambers into Microsoft Teams meeting, and some of the officers involved this evening will be joining remotely via Teams. I need to inform everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and broadcast live on the internet through Teams, and the recording of the meeting will then be uploaded and available for repeat view on the councillor's website. So I welcome everybody this evening, and we start with apologies. I only got one apology today, which is Councillor Isobel Balston. I don't have another one. Is there any apology from Amjad? No, there's no other apology. Okay. Declaration of interest.
Hi, Chair. Yeah, I work in alternative provision education, which will become relevant later.
Okay. Did you get that entry? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we all have the minutes of the Adult Social Care, Children and Education Committee for all that item 2, where we look at it. If there's any comment, compliments, or any other things that anybody wants to say. And then if there's nothing, we go to item the minutes of other bodies, which is the Health and Wellbeing Board. So we've got reports there that starts from the 20 January 2023, and then we have 17 March 2023, and then we have 23 June 2023. Is there anybody who's got any comments about the health and well-being? Yes, Councillor Creswell.
I have some comments from a resident, and I don't think this is necessarily the right place to go through them, but I was just wondering what the process was for them to put their comments through to the, would they be best to address the Health and Wellbeing Board themselves, or so would that be through committee services? Okay.
Councillor McQueen, do you want to respond to that one, because you chair the Health and Wellbeing? Okay, thank you. Any petitions? There's none at the moment on item 4. And then item 5, there's no questions from the public. I just wanted also to mention now that the agenda has changed to the one that was publicized, because we have guests that are going to talk about school standards and attainment. So we thought, as they've been teaching the whole day, they are exhausted, and we need them to start reporting, and they will be the ones that will start reporting. And Brian Gradley is kindly offered to be with them and do all the reports. So meaning that the annual school standards attainment is the item agenda that's going to go at the moment, and then followed by the children. All the children reports will go first, and then we'll have the rest of the other things like from adult social care, 2 reports that are coming, and then the last but not least will be new directions, if that's okay with everybody. Okay, thank you. So to start off the meeting, I'll hand over to Brian to talk about the reports. The first report, which is mainly annual school standards and attainment.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. So this is the first of what I hope will be many evenings we spend in ACE committee talking about education, standards, outcomes and schools. We did, as a council, set education as a key priority many years ago. We've had that as a consistent priority in all of our strategic plans. But for some years, we haven't perhaps had an annual standards report for us to consider outcomes for children, consider the quality and the landscape of our local education environment, and for us to work with school leaders to understand both the issues, the challenges and the opportunities. We have a real commitment, I think, in Reading to celebrate education and educators. And this report, I think, is to try and set out a picture of the landscape as is, warts and all, the positives, the high quality education system that we had, led by very passionate and valued leaders, the challenges we're facing in terms of disadvantage for some of our families and our children, and some of the things we're doing as a system to try and create the most positive environment for outcomes for children and then achieve those positive outcomes for children. There is behind this report, as you will see in the coming years, a plea and ask, a request for councillor commitment to help us champion education, champion our educators, celebrate our education and celebrate our educators. In terms of the report, there's a couple of sections to it. The cover report covers off a bit of a context piece and then some of the key areas of activity that we're working with school leaders and school partners on that's very much informed by the latest HMCI report from November, setting out the current national context and also our local context, which hopefully you can see in the cover report. And then the substantive report behind it sets out outcomes and attainment across key stages, and it does paint a picture of concern. We have a high quality education system, but not every single youngster is being able to fulfill their potential. There's an awful lot of work going on to achieve and secure that potential, but the need to support the promotion of leadership capacity, leadership capability, school-to-school support, and really get behind our educators to succeed. This is a time where we need to be doing that. I'm not going to go through the sections of the report line by line. I'll invite councillors to ask questions. I'll just pause in case lead member Councillor McEwen wanted to say any additional words, and then I'll check in to allow my school leader colleagues to introduce themselves to committee. I don't know, Councillor, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Would you like me to speak now, or would we? Would the teachers like to speak first? Teachers first, yeah.
Yeah, I think we can allow our guests to speak onto this. Yeah. Anyone who wants to start from the guests who are here tonight?
I'll make an introduction so people know who you are and what schools you are, and if there was anything you'd like to add to my introduction, I'd welcome that from school colleagues.
Lisa Telling, Executive Head Teacher of Catesgrove and Southcote Primary Schools.
Amanda Walcott Barnett. I'm the Deputy Head Teacher at EP Collier Primary School and one of the anti-racist lead practitioners across Reading.
Thank you very much. If any of you would like to
Chair,
say.
could I ask our guests if they would bring their microphones just a tad closer, because their voice isn't carrying.
Thank you. Yeah. Anybody who wants to start? Thank you.
So I think, Chair, after the introductions, if there's no immediate comments from school leaders on the introduction, I think it was lead member can give her comments and then we'd open up for questions, if that's right.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for coming this evening. It's a really incredibly important report. Obviously, it relates to the previous academic year of 21-22. And as Brian mentioned there, it's the first period for 3 years, and obviously raised concerns about some of the performance around Key Stage 1 and 2. I really like the fact that the priorities listed in the report, and I won't go through all the priorities because I assume colleagues have read them, but you know, school to sport is incredibly important, and promotion of positive wellbeing for school leaders and staff, and targeted intervention and support to raise standards. So I think for councillor colleagues, I should want to hear from you about work on sort of ongoing work, and also just to stress the importance for us, as Brian mentioned as well, to support staff who are, supporting our children. We're aware of, difficulties post-COVID as well, and obviously, nationally, lack of funding from central government, and all these factors are impacting on our schools, on our children, and ultimately on the staff. So it's really important to work together to support. So I'd just like to hear more from staff. Thank you.
So Andrea and myself were appointed to do the anti-racism work across Reading, because the data shows that Black Caribbean pupils are underperforming in Reading schools, which echoes with our personal experiences, and that's why we were really passionate about doing this work. We have, first of all, ascertained pupil voices, which we can say was really hard hitting in terms of some of their experiences and their lack of confidence to report it. From there, we've looked at educating school leaders and teachers and trying to make changes within the curriculum to try and make an impact. So the work's only been ongoing for a year, and so far we're only just starting to see the impact. So we're working with the university in terms of recruitment, because what we found is that a lot of Black Caribbean children will be unlikely, or white children will be unlikely, to go to school and see a person that looks like themselves in the classroom. So that already puts a barrier to their aspirations. So in terms of the research that we've had from Lambeth currently, we're trying to increase teacher expectations of the pupils. We're trying to make sure the curriculum is more reflective. We're trying to make sure we've got a diverse school workforce, and hopefully that will improve the attainment of Black Caribbean pupils within the school. Andrea also does a lot of sharing information about the impact of mental health on the Caribbean students as a result of their experiences within the school system and experiencing racism.
You've said most of what we've been doing. So we've been into 8 schools to train staff, and we've also led sessions where school leaders from schools around Reading have come and trained with us, and they found it really impactful, and they've started doing work in their own schools. So we're hoping to continue the work for at least another year and longer, hopefully.
In case you didn't hear before because the mic wasn't working, I'm Simon Utley from Blessed Hugh Frinan School, the head teacher. I've been a head for 19 years, and this is the most collaborative local authority in terms of head teachers I've ever worked in. The capacity for school to school help is huge, because the trust level, particularly speaking to my secondary colleagues, is enormous as well, and there's real opportunities here. On a number of levels, as has been indicated, it's in the report, standards aren't where they need to be, but there are things that can be done. There's things at officer level, and we're well supported here by officers, and that's not the case in every authority anymore, but also by head teachers and systems leaders within the authority as well. So we come here, first of all, I think, to say thank you for this invitation. Reminds me of my previous authority where this was a standard annual thing, and I hope this will be annual for us again going forward. But also we're here with no lack of ambition to help drive forward education in Reading. That sense of contributing to the common good is something that all my colleagues, particularly my secondary colleagues who I know very, very well, are involved in. But before I hand over to Lisa next to me, I think the fact that Lisa and myself as neighbouring schools, different kinds of schools, but neighbouring schools, you know, we work very, very closely together as well at that cross phase, that whole primary, secondary transitional phase as well. And I think that's, again, an example of the kind of thing that is not standard everywhere. So I'd like to think that notwithstanding the challenges that the paper presents in terms of standards and the need to drive these standards forward, there is no lack of ambition or generosity or commitment to the common good among the school leaders with whom it's my privilege to serve in this authority.
I would echo what Simon said. So I co-chair Reading Primary Heads Association, and we've just re-established with the help of Brian and Alice the local cluster working. So some of you may be aware of clusters. Looking at a particular councillor who I know is very aware in the past, but we're actually up and running again, where schools are working together with a common aim. There's commonality within the clusters of schools. Reading is a very diverse and different place, and I think actually really recognising the differences and the different features of the clusters really helps schools to shape what is going to happen. Can I just echo about Andrea and Amanda's work? Both of my schools have taken part in that work, and actually it is our Federation Development Plan core aim next year to really ensure that every aspect of our curriculum represents the diversity of the children that we serve. And what I'm really excited for is that the East Reading cluster have also signed up to that, and they also want to look at training. So I think it's for councillors to understand that school-to-school support in such a challenging environment makes Reading a really attractive place to work. We suffer from being not out of London, not fringe London. If you go to Bracknell, teachers get paid more. Recruitment is really hard. We need to sell ourselves differently. We need to be able to offer something different for teachers to come to Reading. And I think we are an amazing, diverse town, and to be able to reflect that in our curriculum, reflect that in the work that we do, but also to be a really exciting place to work where schools work together. Your primary schools predominantly are local authority schools. They want to work with the local authority. We don't want to be academies. We don't want academisation. School-to-school support is a real way forward, we think, to support what we would like, which is to remain as part of Reading Borough Council and to remain local authority. And I think if you can support us with that school-to-school support, we can give the aims that you want for our town, and then our young people go on to be really successful moving forward and really build Reading up to be something that it is. It's something really special. I don't come from Reading, I come from the northeast, but I really love working here, particularly because of the diversity of the children we serve. And I think we really need to reflect that and really sell us and sell ourselves better than we do. And I think that would help this real recruitment crisis, which is across all of education, but particularly in the southeast. I think we need to stand out, and to be able to go into schools where they're collaborating, working together. The children are getting to do sports partnerships, sports festivals with each other. It's not just about our English, maths. Those things are really important, but it's about that whole wider curriculum and that wider offer that our children get.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's heartfelt, really. Anybody who wants to make a statement, comment, or question? Councillor Goskin.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming. It's really appreciated. As you can imagine, as councillors, schools are kind of fundamental to so much that we do, and for the families and children we represent. I'm lead councillor of children, so obviously have a clear passion around children achieving their potential, and there's no getting away from the fact. I mean, it's as Mr. Grady highlighted, there's real challenges here. I think in lots of ways the real challenges that we see here should kind of are not unexpected. Reading is one of the most very diverse. It's a fantastic place to live, but it's also one of the most unequal places in the country. And we know that where there's inequality, there's real challenges in terms of all sorts of issues, and education is one of those, which makes what we're talking about in terms of ambition, expectations, even more important. I mean, I think I really welcome this as an item, and I think come back every year and having this this dialogue is really important. And we can't speak for everyone, but I will speak for the authority. That we absolutely looking at how we can be supportive and work together. But I think you should expect us also to be challenging and to holding schools to account, because that's our job. And we can see here, I think, very clearly the areas that we need to improve on. I mean, I think the actions that are highlighted, I'm not going to go through all of them because there's a lot of areas of work, and I think part of our job, I think, will be looking at how that's then progressed, isn't it, over the coming year, because there's a real urgency around what you do and and education, because of course when my children just moving through it, I got one's 17, one's 14, but it's all over so quickly, and actually making sure we get it right is an absolute urgency here and now. So really pleased to hear that from yourselves, that kind of thing. The priority 3 for my mind is one of the ones I think is the inequality one, isn't it? I'm sorry. Yes, my I need reading glasses, I think, nowadays when I'm looking at this stuff. It is really, I think, critical and important. It was really, interesting and to hear the stuff that's been said there. And I think the priority and the work around that's in this report, I think, is vital. I mean, I think what's really I find really frustrating about the situation we find ourselves can almost be in as, the financial implications in 10, whereas, plainly says that, councils have been taken out of the role of supporting you in a more, obvious way. I know you're talking about school support. So it does, I think and I know that I think certainly my Labour colleagues are very frustrated about the fact that councils have been taken away from that sort of direct support role that we could hold in the past. And we do need to think about how we can be more imaginative, challenging and supportive going forward. I think you've talked about it. I mean, the staffing crisis is one that we need to think about how we can be mutually supportive. It's something that's facing public services across the town. Reading's a great place to live, but because it's a great place to live, it's also incredibly expensive. Some people want to live here, property price shooting up, just outside of London. So I mean, I think we look at it'll be about social workers, whether it be about care workers, teachers, about attracting public servants to the town and supporting them is something that we need to think always about where we can go on that. I think that's broadly where I have it. I mean, I think I suppose we ought to also reflect upon the impact of COVID. I think in terms of teaching, I think it was appalling the lack of government support, financial support for the recovery. I mean, which was so poor. Was it about, I can't remember, was it a fifth or a tenth of what was suggested? So poor that the guy who was heading up the review quit in disgust, I think. So that's the situation we're in, along with the underfunding, that the teachers aren't being paid enough. So we know teachers aren't being paid enough, and the messages coming out of government are not very positive. In fact, I think, well, we wait to see in the next week or so, but it may well be you'll be funding any teachers' pay increase from your own budgets and nothing coming from government. So these are significant and major challenges. I'm not really coming with any solutions other than the fact that we're here to support, and we will be looking at this as a focus and a priority over the coming year in terms of how we do this. And I mean, I suppose, any questions? I suppose you've actually answered the questions I was going to ask, which was kind of about, and I think actually I'm going to ask it a little bit more detail, because I think the one bit I'm really interested in is that bit about raising expectations of teachers, of their pupils, because I think that's almost critical in lots of ways. So I'm quite interested in how that's progressing as a program, so we can get out of that sort of cycle of low expectations leading to low outcomes, leading to low expectations. Thank you.
So you will see in the paper we've been doing, a lot of schools have been doing work with both Voice 21, which is looking at oracy, because before you can read and write, children need to speak. And if you look at the research for particularly our 2-3-year-olds, that's where it doesn't go well. If they don't, and we've had, Andrea is my inclusion lead. We have a lot of children who come now into primary school who are non-verbal. So we need to really start with those speaking and listening skills and what we do there. But we also need a really clear, well-sequenced curriculum. And then we've been working on how we instruct the children in that curriculum. That's something called the Principles of Instruction. So in the detail of the report, you'll see something called the Tom Sherrington project that people have been working on. So my school's in its 3rd year of that, and it has been transformational in our teaching. I've been very lucky to have people come and visit our school regularly, and it's around the behaviours for learning, and it's also about how the staff really break down the learning into tiny small steps, so that our children who are the novice learners, who find it the hardest to learn, have no option but to learn. That's how granular our approach now is to our curriculum. And the schools that have rolled this programme out have been really successful. And can I just say that the Key Stage 2 data is a little bit skewed because it's a reading, writing, maths combination. If you look at the maths and the reading scores for primary schools, they're so much stronger, because writing was the biggest gap that we had for COVID. So don't just be too skewed by just the purely the reading, writing, maths combined. But that's what we've been working on as a whole local authority project. And lots of schools have gone into that project and are at different phases. But those who've been in it the longest, and I know Simon's also been doing it in secondary, have seen the biggest impact. For my two schools, we're two big schools, we have seen transformation in our teaching. We've always had good teachers, but they haven't quite had those ingredients and it was a missing gap of how to sequence that learning step by step by step so that the children cannot fall and it stays in their long-term memory.
Thank you very much. You go ahead.
So I'd echo everything that Lisa said in terms of the technology by which we improve capacity and so on. Children have only got one chance, that's been said already this evening, and I think I'm just putting a different spin on it. That sense of moral purpose is something which I think is at the heart of every good school teacher and every good teaching assistant. Let's not forget our support colleagues who are absolutely key in all of this. So their training, their formation, and then when they arrive in school under the new ECT arrangements and the rest of it, all those things are opportunities to make sure that they keep their ambitions high. I do think it also comes down to the quality of leadership in our schools as well. And we've got, or you've got as elected members, you've got some really good leaders in this authority, and I think that's a very important pull factor when it comes to making sure that our colleagues in schools are not, I don't know, to use an old word, coasting or anything else of that nature. I think in good schools, those days, they're not entirely gone, but they're more or less gone in the sense that coasting isn't acceptable anymore and people are held to account for that properly and appropriately. So I think nowadays, but I think it's right to always keep that in mind, that in schools, that there is, it's so important that we remember the end game, and the end game is not defined by, in my situation, what happens in a hot examination room age 16 or 18. It's about that child as someone who flourishes as a person and feels that they have value and all the rest of it that goes with it. So the ambition for our children in terms of learners goes hand in hand with their sense of being valued. A big part of that comes also down to their home environment, of course, as you know, and we can't do everything in schools, however many toolkits we use. So the home environment is key. But on top of that, in our schools, making sure that the children have the richest opportunity possible and that they recognise that they're not defined solely by summative outcomes, however important they are.
I'll take Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Davis after, and then I'll come back to you, Brian.
Thank you. I think probably almost all of us have got vested interests in that we're either parents or grandparents and have kids going to your schools. I've got a double interest because I qualified about 6 years ago as a teacher. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, what a journey that's been. I really picked my timing. So I'm really pleased to see what's happening here, and it's so lovely to hear your sort of enthusiasm and clarity of vision for Reading. That's really, really important, and it's that will drive this through. And I think probably we're all going to agree that this should very much be an annual thing where, we hear from you, we hear what you need from us, because it's really just about us listening to you as the experts and the professionals and knowing what we can do to support you. I did have one query, because I'm actually just over the border in the interests of being able to talk at these meetings. So I'm just inside West Berks. We have a lot of Reading kids who go to West Berks schools, and I know we have the same thing at the Wokingham boards, because we are the centre. We have an overspill, we have people going to schools. Is there are relations there good? Do we work alongside with those?
So I can talk from the primary sector and say that there is definite relations. I definitely know at the LA level that we work cross-border, because it's all of our children. We have Reading children in West Berks and Wokingham schools, Oxfordshire schools, and vice versa. So there is always that link up there with the sectors. I think that could be closer, and I'm sure that will be closer. And I know there's a a real drive to make those connections. We have Reading heads who've gone on to be West Berks advisors, so we have natural links that we keep in contact with each other. So I think that's what I can talk from the primary sector.
Yes, I'd say the same thing as well. I think the relationships are very good, and we often, in the secondary group, we often invite colleagues from across the border as well, and also in some of the very practical things around managed moves and so on. There is a good relationship there with other colleagues too. So I think that's a strength.
Thank you. That is really reassuring, and it's what I was very much hoping that you would affirm for me. The other thing is I suppose more for us, because again this fudgy issue of outer London waiting comes up, and I know we've been talking about it for years, and I think everyone's in agreement that public sector workers in Reading should receive that. Can we push again for it? I know we hit a brick wall. I'm looking at the administration here because they're the ones who lead on this stuff. You know, is there any way we could, I don't know, start kicking again to try and get Reading? I've never understood why Bracknell gets it and we don't. You know, it's the other side of the road, for crying out loud. So yeah, that's kind of.
Thank you. Could I have Councillor Cresswell and then Councillor McQueen? I'll put you back, Brian, because you can. Oh, sorry, Richard. Sorry.
Thanks,
sorry, Councillor Davis.
You're forgiven. One time. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Lisa, that was wonderful to hear that your monologue at the beginning and your enthusiasm and passion, and saying such wonderful things about Reading, given that you're not from Reading, which no one is actually, or very few people. Like it appears. But I was interested to hear about the one of the things you said about Reading, particularly, was its diversity, which strikes most people who are not from here. That is true, and therefore I just was going to ask Andrea about like something about that work you do in that. What should we expect to see change as a result of your work on inclusion? Like how I can understand what your goals are, but if you want to expound on them, but also should we monitor, if you like, or what should we expect to see in terms of outcomes going forward on that?
So I think the most important thing is accounts from our young people about their experiences in school. So hopefully we'll see that those are improving, that they are learning from a curriculum that represents them, that they feel part of. Obviously, we want better outcomes in terms of results for our young people. I think it will take time. It's a really big job. We do have a strategy, but things like looking at the curriculum is a really, really big undertaking that I think we will need support with. You know, I'm primary trained, I'm not a history specialist. So I think looking at something like the history curriculum will need some support. It is difficult to measure, and actually the difficulties that our young people are facing are complex. And like Simon said, some things that we are able to influence in school, some things we're not able to influence, like poverty. And that has been recorded, hasn't it, in the Lambeth report. So we have got a big undertaking, but we're really committed and passionate about it. Thinking about our own experiences at school as well, and we want it to be better for our young people because it's in everyone's interests for everybody to succeed.
And I just want to add to that, the impact's going to take time for us to see it, but just using my school as a pilot, last year we had 0% for our Black Caribbean. This year I was appointed as the deputy head, and it's not a direct correlation. We've done a lot of work on our curriculum, a lot of work training the staff, and we've got 100% for our Black Caribbean pupils. So if we could roll that out and we could see these children attaining, that will be our work well done.
Can I just build on that by saying the work that Andrea and Amanda have done with my two schools? It's not just changing the lives of children, it's changing the understanding of the adults. You know, I sit here as a white female and I have such a different take, having had the training I've had from Andrea and Amanda, about what it's like to grow up in a black community and the prejudice and the racism that's faced. And actually, I think it's really important that if we get the education right for all of our children, we understand each other's lived experiences, and we understand and we create a group of young people going forward who can change our world, who can stop racism. You know, I would hope everybody here has worked really hard across the years and we felt things were moving forward against racism, but we're heading into a really uncertain future at the moment, and I think it's really important that we teach our children, but we also educate our staff, and we also understand the impacts that racism has across our community and the lived experiences of our black communities and our people of colour across our communities. And only by understanding can we then help to change minds. And I think the work that these ladies do is so important, not just for our children, but for the adults that they also work with.
Thank you. Councillor Criswell.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentations. The anti-racism work sounds great. I want to talk about priority 3, which is really nice to see in there, which is the focus on the poorest attaining children, who are the population I work with, and spend a lot of my time working with. And it's really welcome and it's really well phrased, and it's very hopeful for the future, I think, if these initiatives pay off. My kind of comment stroke question is that we currently have a population of older kids who haven't had this experience, and there are a lot of children out there who are refusing to go to school or find mainstream schools very challenging. And a lot of the time they come to us and they're on roll at a school, but they may not have been in for a year. And my concern is that on the books, when everyone's looking at the books, they're fine, they've got a place. But a lot of these people, these children, aren't accessing the education that they have on offer. And they're not excluded from school, but they're not being welcomed in and it's not working for them. And yet they stay on roll. So I'm just kind of wondering if there's anything.
I think I'll let Brian respond to that one, and then I'll come back to Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll make others some comments on earlier questions. I'll hold them till later, but thank you so much, Councillor Cresswell, for this question. We know that nationally, one of the issues we've had about COVID, and it's too easily forgotten that, oh, it's been and gone. No, for our youngsters, this is going to affect them for their whole generational lives. We've got young people who are really struggling still to re-engage with education. I'll give you some assurances. So there are some things the local authority does in terms of ensuring that we're working very, very closely with schools to maximise children being in school. We have very inclusive schools in Reading. Some of the work we've done through something called therapeutic thinking in schools, our trauma-informed approaches, is about the lived experience that I think, you know, Lisa articulated better than I ever could. So we absolutely see the child. There are systems in place as well to make sure that if a child is in a situation where they can't be full-time in school for whatever reason, we access alternative provision. We've got some very high quality local alternative provision, which can be really great. We are clear on those children who are missing education. And we've done a couple of things to try and maximise bringing children back. Not one moment suggesting this is solved, but just to react to it. The council actually invested additional money off the back of the COVID recovery monies that we got from government. So one of the things that the council did is spend money on an emotionally based school avoidance project. So its work is to work with young people who are experiencing mental health difficulties, issues, to try and engage them back into school and schooling. And it's a very targeted piece of work. It's been quite impactful. So in terms of what the council's done above and beyond, I think it's been that's something we should take a lot of pride in as a council. And we're looking at how we can continue that. Colleagues, I'm conscious Alice Boone, our Senior School Effectiveness Officer, haven't spoken yet, but I don't know if there was anything else we wanted to add in terms of our most vulnerable kids, and then if there was anything that school leaders wanted to add.
Evening, councillors. All our policies have that underlying principle around inclusion. So Lisa talked about some of the projects that many schools have collaborated on, and the work of the Education Partnership Board will be to make sure that every school participates in those, because they're research informed, they're based on inclusive principles, and we shouldn't see I would hope we wouldn't see it now, that idea that people would turn up at a school and be told this one isn't for you and your children. I think for the vast majority of schools I work with, that's now an abhorrent principle based on that common values work we've done around therapeutic thinking. I'm proud of the inclusion that we have in our schools, but we all recognise that we want to keep getting better about that. And in some ways that's slightly against the national direction of policy travel at the moment, but we have the commitment of our heads. They have told us they still want to continue to have Reading schools for Reading children on their doorstep. So if you live here, you go to this school. There are areas like the EBSA project which have been impactful, where there is any funding, they are good things to fund. They're evidence informed, we can show impact, and I think we want to continue those because our schools do an awful lot, particularly our mainstream sector actually, but they're not resourced yet at the level where they can meet all needs, and ideally that's the world we all want to live in. So your support on those through policy is always incredibly welcome, because this is a town that wants to include every child. It really is.
Thank you. Councillor McQueen, you wanted to add something?
I was going to ask about if you could expand a little bit on SEND, but I know that's coming up in the next agenda item, so we could postpone it for then. If you want to just talk to colleagues a little bit about or it's highlighted in the report.
So yeah, there were a couple of questions earlier as well that I'm happy to come back to, Chair, when you think it's appropriate in terms of some additional comments. I just wanted to check in, was there anything that school leaders might add around inclusion and just to make sure we hadn't missed the schools.
Just very quickly, I think that it's mentioned several times in the report, the word complexity. And I think it's always important that when we think about disadvantage, we recognise that it's multifaceted, and unfortunately, so many other negatives and things that hold children back tend to coalesce around certain, vulnerabilities as well. And really proud that in my school, and I'm sure that other colleagues as well, Lisa and colleagues next to me, to have staff who've over the years developed real expertise, often starting from nothing at all to unlock these complexities, and to reach out to hard to reach families and parents, which is a big part of the job. And as you know, and I know we always say this in the school sector, we go routinely above and beyond any kind of job description all the time just to do the job. And in terms of getting involved in social care, housing, everything. And I think that it's just always important that that word complexity, which is mentioned several times here, Reading has got complex schools, and complex problems need sophisticated responses.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor McQueen.
I just wanted to finish off and say it's been really beneficial for I think for us councillors, for you all to come in this evening. So I really appreciate it. I'm sure we all really appreciate it. But it's we sent reports which were obviously brilliantly written by the staff, but it's when people come and actually talk about the reports and bring them to life, it really helps, and it makes it a lot more interesting, but really beneficial to understand the issues and hear about what you're kind of experiencing daily. So I really appreciate you coming in, as we all do. So thank you.
On the inclusion agenda, I think everybody sat at the table is, we run really inclusive schools, and I know you must hear that phrase, but there's a real determination in Reading that our Reading children, no matter what the complexity of their needs, deserve a place in Reading that they can go to into their local primary schools, local secondary schools, particularly in primary, the primary sector, the primary SEND team. I'm looking particularly at Andrea here because she is a SENCO on top of all the other roles that she runs. And we work really hard to create the provisions that aren't there out there in special schools at the moment. So something councillors might not be aware of is lots of primary schools are running their own provisions and working really hard to develop really bespoke curriculums to meet every child's needs, because they're being turned down at special school because there isn't the place, even in wider Berkshire. We don't want our little ones getting in a taxi and travelling 40, 50, 60 minutes sometimes 2 hours to get to school. We are working hard as a community with the very, very limited fundings we have to create those places within our mainstream primary schools, because we believe they need to be in a mainstream school in their own community. If there's anything we can say, it's that's where we really need those resources, because we can do it, but it does require resources. And one more thing from me is a bit like Simon said, our TAs are incredible. They're absolutely amazing, and they get paid more to go and work in Aldi. We really have to sort that out, because actually they do the most incredible job, often with our most vulnerable children, and we need a pay scale that reflects their work. Sorry if I overstepped the mark, but I couldn't help myself because I'm here.
No, you're fine. Councillor Robinson. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a few things. Firstly, thanks to the officers for this report, and thank you for coming in. You've probably had very busy days, so we appreciate your time here, but thank you as well for the passion and commitment that you show in terms of education. My thoughts are that yes, there are bad news stories within this report, but there are also positives. I mean, on the executive summary, outcomes for children looked after and for bilingual children categorized as having English as an additional language are stronger. So there is good news within this. And bear in mind as well, this was more or less directly after the pandemic. You mentioned about children beginning primary being non-verbal. Well, that is probably down to the fact that those services were effectively shut down during the pandemic. So that is totally understandable. The other thing is this was based on 21-22 academic year. Could I ask, do we have any indication on the 22-23 year whether improvements are coming through at this stage?
Brian, do you want to take that one?
So the short answer is we're now looking through our data to see the impact. My expectations are we're talking about a long-term 3 to 5 year period to see serious change.
Okay.
We need, and I would probably weave in some response to some of the previous remarks to connect with that. Councillor Hoskin, I was grateful for you mentioning that section 10 around finances. The local authority has had the school improvement monitoring brokerage grant removed, so we no longer have resources to do direct work, but we have generosity in spirit, but also in money, frankly, from school colleagues. So the dedicated schools grant that Reading Borough Council administers, we go to Schools Forum on a yearly basis. Schools invest in the local authority, so there is a small amount of resource for some capacity for us to do some work. We will build on that in terms of how we use that investment to achieve that 3 to 5 years. And there were two other points, Chair, that really struck me to do with that. Recruitment, workforce. There is something there that I think could be interesting for us as council and as councillors. What would a dynamic, I think the words were creative, innovative workforce strategy look like? I think that Lee mentioned. That could be about how we might recruit for TAs, about us as a town. It could be about accessing some of the resources in the private sector business, our cultural organisations in Reading. So I think, Councillor, I would tie in that longer 2, 3, 4 year trajectory that I would expect with the opportunity for potentially bringing those other resources together. Probably the final part I'd say that is looking back to my school colleagues, as you can see, if we could build that school to school support structure, there isn't the resources there for it now, but if we could build that capacity for school leaders to work together to secure the improvements, I think that will be a particular thing that would accelerate the trajectory. That would reduce a 5 year improvement trajectory to a 3. So there's a big piece of work this year about how can we support, endorse, champion as a council, something around school to school support infrastructure. That'll be a key way, Councillor Robinson, of reducing the timeframes to see some of those impacts.
Thank you. I just wanted to take time, my privilege as chair, and also to make some comments that about this report and everything, because one of the schools in my ward, Weekly, is not only the attainment, it's also the structure of the building, where they can't have enough funding to do anything. Most of the children, as we know, school is one of the places that they can find sanctuary and come to it and see how they can also say, you know what, I might not have a proper home, but at school, at least I need it to be proper in that sense. And this Weekly is one of the most deprived areas where there are a lot of complexity that you have mentioned. I have children that went to primary and secondary school here, and I do understand some challenges that have been mentioned here. I think Amanda and your team have worked so hard. I think they also want to commend that I met Amanda in one of the sessions we've been doing in the community. I think we've done 3 sessions or 4 sessions around with ECA about Black children and the parents coming to talk about the challenges. And Brian has attended the last one where he had a barrage of questions from families, and he stood up and just wanted to hear and give the listening ear to that. And it's a good work that you are doing, but we need to go, as you have said, it's very complex, and we need to find out, just not brush away the complexity, but bring the intersectionalities of identities and a look of how we can work together and support all this. Thank you so much for coming. I think it's so important, some of these things for us to take on board and not just make it a report and follow it up with a lot of other things. Thank you. So I just want to make the recommendations. If Brian, you don't have anything more to say, or councillors there. The recommendations for the committees to us to know the position regarding school standards in attainment is set out in the report. Endorse the priorities and current planned activity to further improve attainment with a focus on priority groups. To receive further reports in the forthcoming academic year on progress of actions and impact on standards and attainment. I just want to ask if the committee agrees with this. Anonymously agreed. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you even for coming. Thank you. We'll let you go and have your evening meal early because it's been a long day. Thank you. Okay, we move on to the next agenda. Again, it goes to Brian. Again, it's about children with SEND accessibility strategy 2023 to 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So there is a legal requirement to have a SEND accessibility strategy. The eagle-eyed policymakers amongst the councillors will clock that it may not be actually a strategy. Councillors know that we have an area SEND strategy agreed with the local NHS called our area SEND strategy that sets out the needs of all of our children, the priorities we have to improve their outcomes. The accessibility strategy articulates our requirements to ensure that we are being as inclusive as possible in policy, particularly around maintained schools. So to be honest, you've just heard colleagues talk about what the policy looks like when it's enacted. So the point is that we set up an accessibility strategy that sets a set of principles. We share that with schools, then they need to show us how it will be enacted. And hopefully you've actually had a live demonstration of that in the previous agenda item. It's updated from the previous accessibility strategy that has come through and been decided by the council. So it's something for you to decide. And it deals with both infrastructure issues, but also inclusion in the way that you've heard this evening. It doesn't have any power regarding non-community maintained schools. What I mean by that is academies. But hopefully you will see in the cover report, and the intention is that we will absolutely determinedly advocate and champion for these principles to be seen in our work with trusts. I meet on an annual basis in the autumn term with the chief executive of every local MAT to ensure that they're brought into our Reading vision. So we will be actively promoting these principles to all of our schools are as inclusive as possible. I'm happy to take questions on the document as it's and hand to lead member for comment.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. I'll start with Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for the updated report. I'm sure colleagues have had a chance to read through, and I think it's you know, obviously breaks down the importance and reiterates the importance of our children with SEND being able to access school, access education, and improve the physical environment for schools and increase access for our pupils. We're all obviously aware of the shortage of places in Reading for SEND, so this will be an important policy and strategy as we develop more sites. So I think it's, I'll probably leave it at that. I think it's incredibly important, so thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. I don't really have a question, but just to sort of, we've seen this report come through our groups, etc. I had a chance to feed into it, so that's, I really want to speak in support. You know, we had a theme this evening of inclusion, and then you have also mentioned, Brian, about importance of children reaching their potential, whether that's children who happen to go to council schools or academy schools or whatever. You know, children who have special educational needs, particularly, could be at risk. There's huge amounts of potential that they have there that we ought to be ensuring and prioritising that we ensure that they can meet, and that their access to our wonderful education services in Reading are accessible to them as well. And that is a number of ways, and we've all probably got experiences because there are many children in Reading who have special education needs, and we've probably all got first-hand experience, or we know people, or we have them in our household who, with the right adjustments, whether that's transport adjustments or physical building in the school itself adjustments, staff training, other arrangements, they could have wonderful potential as high as anyone else without special educational needs. And the fact that we're, you know, so comprehensively laying out our aims in here, I think is definitely to be supported, and something I think hopefully we will all support. And you know, it's something we want to have a theme going forward. I think one of our colleagues will talk about that. Because we want to make sure that we see these things through and we see what the results are. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Cresswell and then come to Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. I think it's great. I think schools are the right place for children to be, as long as the provision can be made suitable, and this is a great strategy, I think, towards making the provision suitable. And for children in this maintained system, the suitability will be reviewed and monitored, I assume. Can I clarify what you're saying about children in academies, then, that we have no oversight? So if, for instance, a child was referred from a maintained school on a temporary basis to an academy, and the provision wasn't suitable, they could conceivably stay on roll. And in fact, I know children this has happened to, who were referred for a 2-week stint and spent 5 years in completely unsuitable education where they didn't really get anything out of it at all. But is it kind of a one-way ticket into academy world, and is there anything we can do to oversee the review of provision, suitability of provision in academies?
I mean, there's some cracking questions in there, Councillor. So if I unpick a little bit, so this particular requirement is something that Council endorses because we've got a statutory duty to have this in place, but obviously Academy Trusts are also subject to UK government legislation regarding equality, disability access. There are a number of legislative frameworks which support our young people, and it's to be clear that locally We've got all of our schools brought into our SEND strategy and our approach. So the bit about how we have collectively co-produced with parents, with children locally, how we respond. We've got a model locally of the how, and there are some statutory things. So it's just a point of fact that this is not something that's enforceable on trust due to policy frameworks. The couple of bits you mentioned there about children and where they go to school, there's a couple of points about children go to one school and they don't go to another one. So it might be useful if we take offline checking those individual experiences to make sure, because that could be 2 or 3 different things, and I'd be more than happy to work that through. It comes back to the question, what's really helpful about this is what every parent, what every single child and what everybody in our community should be able to look at and go, well, this is good enough for every single child who goes to a Reading school, that must be good enough for everybody. And that's the utility, I think, of this document. It's a hopefully clear way of saying this is what you can always expect. And I think when I talk to parents of children with SEND, I was really struck by a counsellor's comment about the potential for our youngsters. We need to move to that model. This is about difference and not deficit. And if we can take that potential, that's about saying to every single school, we've got youngsters with amazing potential here. We must access that potential by creating accessible education. So I'd be very happy, Councillor, just to pick up 1 or 2 of those other things to give both myself some assurance, but also for you to understand where you might want to go with some of those concerns if they're still there as well.
Thank you. Councillor Govan.
Thank you, Chair. And can I welcome this report? It's a great step forward, and particularly with my hat on as Chair of Access and Disability Forum, great to see policy being developed and enshrined. Worrying that we don't have the ability to make sure all schools do it, and it's only influence. I wonder whether there will be whether it will be possible for us to have some sort of report in possibly a year's time to assess the success of this strategy or not, because it seems to me that a strategy is only worth its ability to be implemented and to make a difference. So it's the so what question, isn't it? So I'm saying so what? So I mean, I'm not quite sure how we measure it against, whether we measure how you are going to measure your success in terms of delivering this strategy. But I would like to see a report come back to committee which assesses how successful or not, or what the barriers have been to implementation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Councillor. So within the model strategy, what we've tried to encapsulate this time is underneath each section what schools should do and some of the things we are doing. And that would fit very neatly with the idea of coming back in a year and saying how successful was that implementation. The other thing that's mentioned here, which is a point of detail perhaps, but I think it's an important one, is that we have a SEND strategy that's been agreed by Council that goes to health and wellbeing on an annual basis for like a bit of an update in the November. It might be useful for that to come to ACE committee as well. So I think the suggestion from officers would be to combine an update on the accessibility strategy success with the wider SEND strategy, everything we're doing for our youngsters, and do that as an annual update. So I'm grateful for you helping me offer that as a solution.
You, Councillor Kin, and then I'll come to Councillor Con.
Thank you. Yeah, brilliant strategy, really well thought out, lots of really positive things covered here. I'm just looking at the definition of disability, and a few sort of concerns have sort of thrown up around some of the conditions listed. I mean, that's the nature of the definition. This is what we've got, but how difficult some of those diagnoses are to get a diagnosis for. And also one of the post-pandemic issues, but also was a problem before, was the waiting list for ASD assessments as well. And so, I mean, they're what, two years long? It's a very long time. It's a very long time. So just thinking about what the provision could be for those without diagnosis in the interim while they're waiting on waiting lists. They don't know what their diagnosis is going to be. They have to. That's why they have to have the assessment. So what provision could be in place for them? Thank you.
Let me take Councillor O'Connor and then you can answer the questions together. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it follows on actually quite neatly from that, because first off, I completely agree with Councillor Gavin's comments about, you know, assessing it and the barriers to implementation, that we need to know what those things are, which was going to lead me to talk about the extremely long waiting lists for assessments. And I know that that is not within the wit of the council, but obviously what you're trying to do is held up by those hold-ups. And in that time, everything we were talking about in the last item about the urgency for children only having one shot at their education, and if they're waiting 2 years for a diagnosis, and we know that the schools need the diagnosis to have the money that follows it, we kind of can have the best intentions in the world, but if we have that clarity of barriers, then we have a stick to find the people to bash with it and go help us with this. So I think I'm mainly just agreeing with everybody, actually. Yeah, I think it's a great report, and yeah, I fully endorse it and would like to give as much push, and I'm picking up from everyone else, we want to do the same, behind it to give it, not just to give it as much weight as possible.
Brian?
So if I take the 2 points at a time, it's a really important point about definition. What we've tried to be mindful of is to ensure that our definition is inclusive and doesn't restrict, as in requiring diagnoses for specifically the reason you've touched on. And local practice and evidence, I'll ask my colleague to speak about an example of how we're working to make sure we don't get constrained by both labels, but diagnoses and waiting times and waiting lists. The Health and Wellbeing Board's receipt of the SEND strategy, bless you, Councillor, is a joint strategy, and therefore it's a joint update. It's done annually in November. It does sound like it would be useful for me to reiterate that the waiting times and the access to therapy services is a key priority in the SEND strategy. When NHS colleagues are co-presenting with us in November on the update, I would expect a substantive element of that to be an opportunity. One of the suggestions therefore about bringing to ACE committee was that whilst this goes to Health and Wellbeing Board, if it also came to ACE committee, rather than asking questions on a secondary basis, it would enable you to ask the questions directly, and then there would be a similar kind of thing to make sure we've got those people in the room. So hopefully that would give some assurance on the how we might check, challenge and try and make the system move. Coming back to the piece around diagnostics, particularly around autism, my colleague Alice might just illustrate something we're trying to do around providing support in the absence of.
Yeah, so that is part of the SEND strategy, looking at that barrier of diagnosis. All of the departments, and I will speak for education here, try and have a look at how we can mitigate against that problem, as it were. So one of the collaborative projects that the School Partnership Board and we've been working on is, for example, the Autism Growth Project, where we are working with schools to make sure that actually schools practice in terms of how they teach and their environments, what it's like to learn there, are really adapted and accessible for people who are neurodiverse. And actually, you know, if you struggle with sensory needs, there are tells, there are things that we can notice. If actually your school is somewhere where quiet is valued, where there's a policy of curiosity when someone's dysregulated, you don't need a diagnosis, you've got a toolkit to work to. So we've made really good progress with that over the last 3 years. Again, the barrier for us at the moment in making sure that's every school is around that resourcing issue. And again, the SEND strategy is looking at how do we overcome the sort of lack of investment nationally around this. So yeah, so there are things in place to mitigate and get those waiting lists down and make that a quicker process. And our education psychology service are looking at screening tools that would mean, you know, you can say, actually, this looks like someone who's neurodiverse and is different, not worse. So actually, these strategies will be in place. But we are also looking at how we structure things so that they work from the beginning for everybody and we have less need for diagnosis long term.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on this one, or comments or compliments? Thank
So
you very
Chair,
much.
Chair, were we going to add a number 2 to the
Recommendations.
to recommendations?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll talk about the recommendation. The committee is asked to approve the Children with SEND Accessibility Strategy 2023 to 2025, and the second one, which has been suggested by Councillor Gavin, is to do the recommendations that we come and report back and give all the other information that is needed. Do we agree with all the recommendations? Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll let you go, Brian, and your team to go and read a book for your son. Thank you. Okay, we move on to the next item, which is Melissa Wise, which agenda item, as we have changed to them. This one is all age and paid carer strategy for Reading. So Melissa, it's you now.
Thank you, Chair. Carers play a fundamental role in supporting their family and friends to stay at home and live as independently as possible, and really importantly, outside of care homes. A number of partners, including Brighter Futures, colleagues and health partners, work closely with carers already and provide services for them. And this needs to be reflected in a really joined up way. It's really important that our estimated 13,000 carers have a clear role in supporting partners to understand their priorities and the services that are available to them. And they are able to influence, and the challenges that our carers are currently facing are outlined in the report around access and services available. We do have an established carers steering group, which has reps from a number of partner organisations and indeed carers themselves, who are really committed to developing a carers strategy and an associated action plan. It's really important that we are working with carers to co-design this strategy, and fundamentally their voices are recognised and front and centre of the strategy as it's produced. We started this process and dialogue back in June for Carers Week, which seemed like a really appropriate time to begin that dialogue, and the dialogue continues throughout July. The report outlines our planned approach for working with carers and the timelines for preparing the overall strategy. So the recommendation to committee this evening is to endorse the development of that joint strategy and to endorse the planned approach for consultation and co-design. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Melissa. We go to Councillor Gittings.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, as Melissa's outlined, I think it's absolutely vital that we have a separate strategy for carers, for unpaid carers. And many times you'll find with council documents in other authorities, this will be an appendix to the adult co-social care strategy, which we're going to come to next on the agenda. But I think it's absolutely really important that we keep it separate, and not least under 2.1. You know, some of our obligations under the Care Act 2014. I mean, carers, they're a hidden army, often working on their own, without training, and obviously, as we said, actually without any recompense to public funds, and it's an incredibly tough job. I mean, I had a look at some national statistics from the State of Care 2022, and collectively, the value of the work of unpaid carers in Britain is a staggering £150 billion per year. And I actually, at first, I had to double take. I thought it was £150 billion a year that is being saved. That's almost the cost of the NHS. And of those carers, 75% have had no break or respite in the previous year. And I would suspect that is reflected actually in the across Reading in the 13,000 people that identified in the ONS census of 2021. And of course, if you look at 3.5, there's a gap between those figures and the people that we're giving direct support to, quite a significant gap. So obviously one of the main aims of this strategy, and using, like the Carers Week, which I attended as an information and awareness week, that we need to try and reach out to these people and find them, and not least in terms of the unpaid carers. A lot of those people will be young people. I mean, Brighter Futures have left now, but they've got a vital role to play in this, because we know, and that may not necessarily, I don't know, be covered by the census material. So actually those figures could be larger, because I think we've all visited homes as councillors where we've seen young people effectively running the house, and doing it in incredible, actually heartwarming, but also in a way that you couldn't really imagine, of very young people taking on those responsibility for parents. So there's obviously a real piece of work to do there with Brighter Futures. But more importantly, I think it's really important, as and the recommendations, that we do co-design and co-produce these services with the carers and see what their real needs are, because clearly they're being unmet. It's not just in Reading, but right across the country. So obviously I'm going to commend this this piece of work and this strategy, and I look forward to it coming to ACE in the future, maybe by the end of the year, after we've worked with all these groups, and after that through the various processes, so we can check on progress, as we're going to do with the SEND accessibility strategy. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gittins. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I not only welcome this report, but I'm also delighted, and I think it's long overdue. Unpaid caring is something that, goes on behind closed doors. It's about self-sacrifice, and it's about devotion and everything else. And it really deserves recognition in a big way. I love the fact as well, it says all age. And Councillor Gittins mentioned about young people. Well, there are children that are acting, in a duty of care to their parents, to their siblings, sometimes to the grandparents. This has to be recognised, and support should be there for those individuals when they need it most. So I am fully in favour of this, and will certainly be recommending the recommended action. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane.
Thank you, and I echo that. This is absolutely brilliant. It's really good that we need to do a lot more around supporting carers, and we have had lots of services for carers in the past through Berkshire Carers, and also Tavida, who unfortunately they lost their funding last year or earlier this year. And it's really great that we are looking to remedy some of the things that are missing within our town. And again, we know that carers do a fantastic job, and a lot of them feel that they are doing caring roles without necessarily wanting to. It's kind of thrust upon them, partly because the services that they need to support their loved ones or their friends and neighbours, they're just not there, so they have to do a lot of things that they don't feel skilled to do. A lot of people that I see say, I'm doing this, but I don't see myself as a carer. I'm not a kind person, not a compassionate person. I don't know how to do my job. So there could be a lot of things around trading people up, and I know that there is around sort of maybe sort of manual handling and things, but generally just things around dementia care, and just generally around lots of things that we wouldn't necessarily think about. I did think as we sort of work through this, and it's fantastic. We should take time over it. It has to be right. We don't want to keep having to do this or bring this back. But about the services that are missing in that time, and about how they can be met. So I picked up the Tavida leaflet and looking at what they used to do around providing one-to-one support, to carers assessment. I know that Communicate are doing some of those, and MenCap, but there's a lot of things that they used to do that there's kind of quite a big gap at the moment, where carers are kind of feeling a bit left adrift, and there isn't really the support that they need at the moment. So what can be done to fill that gap while this is going through this process. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other person wanted to make a comment?
So I just wonder if Melissa might want to pick up on some of the points raised by Councillor Keane, some of those gaps, the communicator. Sorry to.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted also to add on, because you have written mainly the list of key engagement partners, something that, as we know, that sometimes we miss these unregistered grassroots organizations that are probably invisible to the eye, but they're actually doing much of the work. And I wonder how we can also try and include and find out how we can reach them out. There are so many unregistered grassroots organizations in Reading that do fantastic work when it comes to those, and they are able to identify the invisible carers on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I think that was a really important point about training for carers, and it goes beyond manual handling. So just to address the gaps question, so we have commissioned a new carers partnership that are picking up on assessments and support. And that is certainly showing some real positive signs. And you can see in the report the numbers of assessments have gone up, which is really encouraging. Through this carer steering group, as I mentioned, it is very well established. And so I think we've got a really strong mechanism to gather the information about the gaps in services. So nothing's come to my attention yet. Doesn't mean that there isn't, but they haven't highlighted anything. So I think at the moment, we've got a good dialogue with that carer steering group to enable that. But through the strategy process, it may well identify other gaps, which we'll be seeking to address and certainly put into the action plan. To your point, Chair, about I think the key thing for us, and I think it was noted that this is going to take time, and it is taking time because this is multifaceted, as we've said, and not least because you have got carers that would not recognise themselves as carers. So how do you ensure their voices are heard? So what you've got is a broad outline, but the teams are doing a huge amount of focus groups and in reach with organisations like ACRE and Alafia to really get underneath into some of those communities where traditionally they wouldn't be talking about themselves as carers. We're also using links with the Royal Berkshire Foundation Trust. So we're reaching out as far as possible to get a broader voice as possible, and then we'll reflect that and test to make sure we fully understood.
Thank you, Melissa. Any other questions on this before we go to the recommendations? Okay, thank you. Now we go to the recommendations, which is the first one. The Adult Social Care, Children and Services and Education Committee endorses the development of an all-age unpaid carer strategy for Reading in conjunction with key partners. The second one is the Adult Social Care, Children and Services Education Committee agrees to the planned consultation with carers to co-design and develop the strategy for Reading. Are we all in agreement? Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. And the next one will probably be yours again. Okay, we come to the next one. The next agenda item, which is updating our adult social care strategy for 2023 to 2026, and it's Melissa, and you're going to have another person, Amanda Nyeke, online. Is she online? Yeah. Oh, she's not attending. Okay, so it's Melissa who is talking about this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So our existing adult social care strategy actually ended at the end of 2022. And whilst we've continued to work with the principals, it is certainly in need of a refresh in terms of going forward. And that's because the context is really changing. So the health partners that are emerging through the Integrated Care Board changes the landscape, the demographic growth in the town, and the number of those households that are declaring that they've got ill health and disabilities, and the complexity of the issues that people are presenting with in adult social care is a changing picture. With that in mind, it's really important to set out the role of adult social care in supporting people to remain independent and manage the expectations about the services that we can provide, demystify some of those myths about what is health and what is adult social care, which is a really challenging landscape to navigate, and equally outline the importance that we all play in looking after our own health and well-being, actually, and that's really important. So strategy is a really useful way to simplify those messages and outline our clear priorities, and then the difference that we're going to make and the commitments on the back of them to do that with residents. So again, in the same spirit as the carer strategy, it's really key that we do that with our residents. And that's not just the people who are in use of adult social care now, but the people that could be in the future, or indeed their loved ones are in receipt of it. At the same time as having those conversations, I think it's really important to talk to them about their expectations, again, for adult social care, and raise the profile of what we do and the workforce that supports it. Therefore, the recommendation this evening to committee is to note the progress already made on the strategy, because we've already started working with our staff to understand their thoughts and priorities, and to again approve the consultation approach and the timescales. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gittings.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa, and obviously underlying the need to update our strategy, not least the complexity. And I was going to say, I've just recently taken over as lead counsellor for adult social care, and you can see very well the complexity. It's challenging, but it's also rewarding, because we're trying to help those most in need, old and young. And I think in the majority of cases we do a good job, but clearly we can't be complacent. And one of the areas we are doing well actually in his budget, and as policy committee report on Monday highlighted, somebody mentioned that we had £237,000 underspend in adult social care for last year, which is, I think it's a credit from Melissa and her team. But equally, we know that maybe a handful of very complex cases is difficult to predict demand, can sometimes mean that a budget under 200,000 can sometimes be a budget several £1 million over. So this is a real problem. And locally, regionally, nationally, what is clear is that I'm afraid adult social care is underfunded. I mean, sorry, Councillor Roberts, I'm going to say this is a result of 13 years of Tory austerity and failure in this area. And in fact, when people receive I'm sure loads of people are watching this on stream, when they receive their council tax bills through their door, they might have noticed over the last couple of years there's a 2% extra for adult social care. The problem is, I mean, Mr. raised the issue of awareness. Most people aren't really aware of what adult social care is until something happens that they're in need of the service or a relative, and then they know only too well. So I'm going to give some more stats. The age profile in Berkshire, a quarter of people in Berkshire West, Berkshire, Reading, a quarter of people are aged over 60 in the town. Some of us have reached that mark. In the next 5 years, just 5 years, that figure's going to increase by 10%. It's a big increase. And of those people over 60, another 60% of those have complex, one or more, let's say, complex health conditions. And of course, as we go up through the ages of 70 and 80, those figures get even worse. And the graph looks like that in terms of the age profile. So we can see that there's a democratic health time bomb awaiting there, with massive implications when there's a separation for social care. And the government has said, they promises Boris Johnson, we're going to fix adult social care. Well, not much sign of that so far. I mean, it came from Boris Johnson, but Not even actually the situation where people have to sell their homes to pay for their care if they're unlucky to go to a care home. So even that part of it, which of course isn't adult social care really, because adult social care is more than just that. But according to Boris Johnson, you seem to be sort of singling down to that. Nothing's been fixed, and the situation obviously for some councils is very, very serious. Some have been really sort of very substantial problems, particularly county councils, over this issue. And some other promises, 40 new hospitals. Well, that's, the aim of adult social care is to keep people out of hospitals actually, but 40 new hospitals that's not materialised in Reading. Of course, we've seen that plans have been shelved. So this is a kind of bleak picture, but against that backdrop, we do, and there's a workforce crisis as well. So we've read recent announcements about get more nurses, doctors. I mean, all very laudable. I mean, the sort of Labour have suggested this. Now they come, the Tories have come with the plan. Absolutely nothing about the social care workforce, where there's a crisis. So one of the teachers mentioned earlier that people, TAs get more money at Aldi. Well, what's happened is, I think one of your colleagues, Melissa, at a meeting we went to yesterday, mentioned the fact that people come over, get trained in social care, may come from other countries. Brexit, of course, is not helping in that respect. And then they discover that they can get better pay at Aldi and Lidl with far less demanding jobs. So what happens? We have a workforce retention crisis. So, but nil desperandum, because look, in Reading, we can try and keep as best we can a window on this, which means we've got to have a really, really robust adult social care strategy. And some of the priorities identified in it by some of the workforce do lie around workforce, making sure that we can retain staff, pay them the real living wage, perhaps some other benefits we can identify, work particularly around co-production and co-design, because therein lies the route actually to salvation for the NHS as well, because if we can keep out of the hospitals and when they're discharged, still keep them out of hospitals, then we might have some hope. But we've got to be able to work with them, on a basis of what matters to them for their health, use community assets, all those things. Some of those things we got in Reading were a great diverse community to keep people out of the adult health system and help save budgets. And then, of course, there's health prevention. We're going to have Health and Wellbeing Board on Friday. We've got John Ashton as the director, and I'm pretty sure he'd have some things to say about cuts in that direction. But we must make best use of resources in terms of prevention as well, so we can really make the strategy work. Again, this is going to come to the end of the year. A lot of work's going to be done. Work with local organisations. Really looking forward to that. To come to this committee, and then obviously we can monitor it again through the ACE process. But thanks everybody. Thanks Melissa for your work so far on the team. But obviously we look to see its fruition coming through the course of the year.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Cresswell and then come to Councillor Hoskin.
Thanks, Chair. Very, very quick one. It's very welcome and it's much needed. Minor point in point 2.5, there's a prediction of the number of older age people. I think there's a typo in the number. It's 166,000 by 243, being 18% of the population. So, which would imply that Reading's population will be 5 times larger by then. So I think that's just a typo.
Very good with your sums, you. Councillor Hoskin.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I just very, very briefly say, I mean, I'm excited because each iteration of our strategies have become progressively stronger and better and take us in the right direction. I was really excited actually to see some of the vision statements that were obtained by the workshops, but that were the staff workshops, weren't they, or stakeholder? There were staff ones. I'm sort of going back and forwards. Particularly like you have things like we aim to empower and support Reading residents to live the way they want to, enabling them to remain independent and reach their potential by building resilient communities and making the most of individual strengths. I mean, that's a fantastic statement. I think really encapsulates what we need to achieve. Adult social care is in crisis and the government's neglected it and there's not enough money, but actually local councils and like Reading are really coming forward with the way that we need to deliver social care, and that is about supporting people to live the lives that they need to live. And when I came on the council ages and ages ago, and it was a totally different approach of, we've got some services, this is what we're going to give you. And we moving away from that gives me, hope and optimism for the future.
Thank you. Any other questions here? Did you want to come back, Melissa?
Thank you for picking up the statistical point. I'll address that.
Thank you very much. I think this is a good strategy, especially when you look at the fact that we're looking at the priority, also the workforce in here, because social work in its own is having been one social worker, you get burnt out totally, and the well-being of our workers is crucial to retention. Making sure that we have a very retention on the workforce is quite important to look at that, because those are the outcomes that will make adult social care strategy also work on that one. Okay, so we go to the recommendations if there's nobody else who has a comment or compliment. First, a recommendation is that the Adult Social Care Children Services and Education Committee note the plans underway to develop Reading's adult social care strategy and the associated timescale. The second one is that the Adult Social Care Children's Services and Education Committee approve the request to consult with Reading residents, including those who use adult social care services, to gather insights and views to co-design the strategy and its priorities. Do we agree? Does the committee agree, all of us? Agreed, they agreed, all of us, thank you. Melissa, you're done with yours, eh? 2 of them. And then we move now to the New Direction annual report. I think Andrea Wood is online. Oh, there she is via Teams. That's the New Directions report that we have. Welcome. Go ahead, Andrea, if you can hear us.
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thank
Brilliant.
you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to read through the report that's been submitted for your information. So those of you that were part of ACE committee last year agreed to have an annual report which just highlights the core service offer of New Directions College, the performance, our emerging developments and learner feedback against the service. A couple of points that I'd just like to highlight for you within the paper is point 3.9, which showcases the current overall achievement rate of the service, which stands at 91.4%, which is 2.6% above the last known national rates for adult education, and shows an 18% improvement on achievement outcomes for adults studying at the college since 2018, when it was 73.4%. So that's really something to celebrate. Other points just to highlight with the committee is 3.24, that in March 2023, Councillor McEwen is now chairing our newly established governance board, which consists of the Assistant Director for Culture, as well as external representatives from the further education sector, public health and Brighter Futures for Children. And there's a list there of the role and responsibility of the governance board. Because New Directions College is a local authority-led adult learning service, we don't have to have a governing board the same as a school or an FE college would. But the fact that we've put a governance board in place to really help drive the strategic direction of the service and drive the performance and quality improvement of the service is really outstanding in terms of governance arrangements. And finally, I just wanted to share the fantastic news around the fact that the college was recognised under 3.25 in June of this year, along with other leisure and culture services, of which Donna Pentelow is representing today. She's in the room with you. It was formally recognised by the LGC and awarded winner of the diversity and inclusion category. So we were really pleased to be recognised within that award, and Donna took me with her to London to present to the panel on that. So we were really chuffed to have that. And the final thing is just to really showcase the survey results from our learners, all of which present a very positive picture, and the comments that we've shared with you are aimed to just highlight the impact that the service continues to have on adult residents across Reading. That's it from me. I'll invite Councillor McEwen to perhaps make any comments, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Andrea, for presenting this report. Firstly, just start off, it's just wonderful news about the award, very well deserved in June, so congratulations. I've visited New Directions to meet you and staff and some of the students, and I can just say that it's just got such an amazing, wonderful feel about the place, so it really is well deserved. I'm sure colleagues have had a chance to read the report, so I won't go through everything, and obviously Andrea's highlighted a lot of important points. But you know, it really is a safe place for adults to build their confidence and learn new skills, and potentially to go into further education or employment. Just some of the provision, and I won't go through everything, the Multiply, ESOL, vocational, technical qualifications, apprenticeships, which we all know with you know, a workforce concerns that we have, and the importance of the apprenticeships that we're providing, just some of the courses available. And the other thing is the main site is Northumberland Avenue, but also there's a range of venues across the town to, you know, support as many people as possible. And just to highlight, many of the students are, you know, maybe long-term unemployed or from vulnerable families, and are all given the opportunity to learn and gain skills and build confidence. So I think we should all actually be really proud of the work New Directions does. I think it's, you know, the team are really dedicated, and we should all be very proud. So thank you for presenting this update.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Cresswell wanted to ask a question.
Thanks, Chair. Very welcome report. It looks great. All the figures are going up. I particularly noticed the enrolment, which is great. Pretty much doubling the enrollment from pre-pandemic levels is amazing, and to be providing a better service to that doubles cohort is great. And that's it really. I just wanted to highlight the doubles cohort.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, echo that as well. Section paragraph 326 and 327 are, I mean, 326 is 2022. Yeah, to both 2020. They're you know, show amazing figures and great success. Just from a sort of more like serious point of view about the impact of second chance, if you like, and that's what New Directions, the name sort of reflects really, ability of like people later in their careers to be able to train perhaps for another skill that they, you know, they've had one career, maybe they're looking to change, or they've their job has gone for some reason. You know, it's going to be really, really important as the demographic of the workforce changes, that older people are able, by say older, I don't really mean elderly, I mean, you know, people over 50 are able to, you know, continue their career, perhaps doing something different than they did in their earlier part of their career. And there's a sort of national push to get older people as they approach retirement age, actually to stay in the workforce. We're lucky in a town like Reading is that it's quite an economically successful place. We don't, luckily, we don't have like the old industries that are making redundancies and people having to desperately retrain to keep employed. But what we will have is that skills shortage and that labour shortage, and that to have a facility that the council provides that whereby people can learn new skills as they're older and change the direction of their career is is fantastic, really important for our economy going into the future. So it's great to see it being so successful, and long may it continue, and long may we as councillors support you.
Thank you very much. Go to Councillor Gavin, and then I'll come to Councillor Robinson.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the report, particularly noting in 3.26, 3.27, the fabulous results from both the learner satisfaction survey and the end of course survey results. Those percentages are outstanding in terms of responses. What I'm wondering is whether you gather any longer term data or longitudinal data. It's the kind of so what question. Do those learners actually go on? Do those who do the employability, course actually go and get a job? Do people who get you get the question I'm asking. I'm not sure that you have to gather that data as part of your grant. I'm not clear, but I think it would be interesting for us and would underline the success of your service if we could show that longer term impact on the lives and opportunities of people who go through courses with you. Thank you.
Before you answer, I'll go to Councillor Robinson.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I had my mic off.
Okay, thank you.
I'll start again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just saying what an excellent report this is. Fantastic news, and congratulations on the award. For somebody like me whose day job is all about learning, I work in corporate learning, but I have very strong ties with I suppose getting people back into employment and such like in terms of what I do. So for me, this is brilliant. I love, what the college is all about, the ethos, the amount of areas of specialism such as ESOL, so teaching English as a second language for want of a better description, the apprenticeship work, provision for adults recovering from brain injury. It's an amazing set of offerings for our residents here in Reading. So fully endorse the recommended action, and again, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor, Deb Edwards, sorry.
Thank you very much, Chair, and fantastic news. I'm not only a local councillor, I'm also chair of Southcote IT Experience, which has worked with New Directions over many years. Before they were called New Directions, they were called the Tea Shop, and before then. What they have done and helped and continue to do, and showing great stats showing that what we have always believed in. I know those people in Southcote have believed in what New Directions has for them, and I think this is absolutely a fantastic note, that having the loyalty, the guts, and the education and the way forward. This is how New Directions has got there over so many years of working with our local people. Our local people in Southcote, we have had engineers, we have people gone to university, we've had people who've actually learnt English as a second language and moved on and worked within our schools. We've had so much our people have had so much out of New Directions and have given so much to Reading, the Reading population. It's absolutely fantastic. It's not only you've educated them, you've made Reading different, and I think that's absolutely wonderful, and thank you.
Anybody else wants to make a comment? Andre, did you want to respond to some of the questions or make a statement about other things? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, thank you so much for your recognition and praise. You know, the whole team at New Directions, you know, we do what we do because we love what we do, and we love making a difference to the lives of others. And, you know, it's just fantastic that we can celebrate that with some solid evidence of how we are making that impact. I think just in response to the question about destination data and how many of the learners move on to employment and into further learning, that is something I can provide you with. We don't have to report that publicly, and it doesn't get recorded by the Department for Education, so it's not normally made public in terms of the qualification achievement rates, as opposed to the facts that I've shared in the report are publicly available. But I can bring that data back to the committee to share that information with you. We've seen particular success on our sector-based work programmes with employers such as Thames Water, Royal Berkshire Hospital and Crown Plaza, where we are seeing nearly a 50% progression of unemployed adults actually moving into job vacancies, which is doesn't sound massively impressive, but actually it is when you consider how far away those adults were from the labour market when they started the course, and they are all referred to us from the job centre as unemployed and claiming out of work benefits. So the fact that 50% of them have secured work through the provision has been fantastic. And our progression for learners into further learning, especially the progression of our learners who progress to a next level of learning, is very significant. So I'm happy to pull that information together and send that out to the committee as a separate information item.
Okay, thank you. Anybody with a comment or compliment or any other comments? Yeah, thank you so much for this. I think it's to the team, because yesterday I met one of the staff who came to our place-based approach in Weekly, trying to reach out to people in Weekly and talking about learning, and most of the things that you write here fit some of the things we're trying to do in Weekly Ward, and thank you for that, and congratulations, Donna, to your team and everybody else for this hard work. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And now we've reached to the final of our agenda. If there's no any other thing, anybody? Thank you so much for everybody for coming. Thank you for all the support. Oh, sorry, I've forgotten about it. I was so enthusiastic about their Diversity Inclusion Award. Recommendation that the committee notes the report for information only.
Noted.
Agreed, yeah, noted. Thank you. Thank you.